So everybody, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Yes. Thank you for joining us, right? And I hope all of you have read our little summary and saw artificial intelligence there. And some of you might be curious. Some of you might be, I know what this is, but I want to see what they have to offer, right? So we'll do this. We'll try to make this a little more interactive. Okay. So we're gonna hopefully engage with you in more meaningful ways, and you'll see how. But our goal today is to keep it light in terms of technology, because AI has been kind of the hype in the market, right? We all know that. All verticals, be it automobile, insurance, everybody's talking about AI, right? So we'll see how it applies to higher education in general and how we can leverage these technologies in our day-to-day lives at our institutions, right? Quick introductions. Ashish Fernando. I'm from iSchool Connect, CEO and founder. iSchool Connect is a platform that helps schools engage with students internationally using AI, so primarily enrollment and engagement. And I'll pass it on to my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Melissa Zarab. I'm the Associate Director of Communications and Outreach at NYU's Office of Global Services. So I not only advise international students, but I also oversee all communications in terms of the web, emails, social media, and then I'm doing a lot with some of the applications we'll be talking about today as well.
Hey, Elise me. Hi, I'm Mackenzie Cushman. I'm the Assistant Director of International Enrollment at Fisher College in Boston, Massachusetts. I work with students from the moment that they say they might want to go to a college in Boston and they don't really know, up until after they graduate and they're on OPT and then moving on to whatever graduate program they want to go on to.
Okay, welcome. Yes. All right. So before we move on, right, and usually presenters get really annoyed when they see the audience on their phones. We're going to be a little different. We want you to be on your phones. Right? Okay.
There we go.
I'm not going to touch it. All right. So just so that we know your needs and where you come from, we're going to use a little poll, right? So you can go on your phones and text EdTech 2868 to this number, 37607. I see a lot of you on your phones. Thank you. This will really help us. So once you do that, you will join. And then I just want you to answer that simple question, right? What department do you belong to, so that we know who's in the room and we can focus more on where you belong and what you do. I hope those responses come up. Maybe we should also try. Okay, it's working. Somebody from ISSS and somebody said SSSS. Hope that's a typo. All right, wonderful. Okay, a lot of folks from ISSS. I'll give it a few more seconds for you folks, because I see some of you are still struggling or trying. Dawn, you kept your word, you came.
I did, you told me to. No.
Wonderful. Abroad, I'm guessing, is study abroad. ED, okay, that's education. All right, interesting. Okay, yeah, I see most of you are done. Okay, so a lot of folks from study abroad, ISSS, some from admissions and IEM. That was what the session was supposed to be focused on, but it's good to have this idea. All right. Full house, yay! Sorry. Thank you, the last 3 people who came. All right.
5 more coming. No.
Cheers. So, what I think we should be focusing on more is stuff that folks from ISSS, study abroad, and admissions are dealing with, which is international students, admissions, also local, right? But how do you retain, engage, and enroll? Those are the 3 key words we're going to be talking about heavily. And we're going to move a little fast. Keep your questions till the end. That will help us. And we definitely have kept some time aside to answer questions and have a more interactive session. of hands. Let's forget technology here. It's a technology session, right? Enrollment. Okay, nice. And just student engagement, right? Existing, prospective, perfect, awesome.
How about C, both?
Yeah, both.
See, oh yes. Sorry, no. Yes, both.
And
All right.
neither oral session.
Neither, yeah. Okay, so this is how we're gonna move. We're gonna look at just introduction to AI. What is artificial intelligence? What the hype is about. Talk a little bit about the impact it has on higher education currently and how it might impact in the future. Look at a few applications from our friends at NYU and Fisher on what they've done and how they've implemented technology in their campuses. Getting started, important for people who think this is difficult, how do I get going, what do I start with, cost, budget, timeline, things like that. The most important aspect we want to focus on is how do we keep ourselves relevant when we're talking about all this technology. So we'll look at a little bit of human relevance, and then we'll have an interactive session where hopefully our technology works by then. So we'll give it like 15, 20 minutes, okay? All right. Who doesn't use this? That's a better question to ask. Any of these? Alexa, Google, Siri. Perfect, right? Everybody uses these. And this is our day-to-day example of artificial intelligence, right? Which is just our phones talking to us and being able to understand what we're trying to speak. And that's kind of what AI is. Artificial intelligence is basically, it's a term applied to machines that mimic our human cognitive functions, and they learn and they problem solve, right? On their own. They understand how we problem solve and they try to problem solve themselves. We'll look at a very specific and a little easy light on our head kind of an example, which is AI chatbots, right? These are conversation agents that are there. Consider your admissions office or ISSS, a lot of people from that function here. It's sitting on your website. It's available round the clock to answer questions to your students based on what you think the answer should be, right? So if somebody says, hey, I have questions on health insurance, and you know what health insurance is, the bot will learn from you. And we'll look at a very quick demo of that. But in order for you to understand the magnitude of that demo, here's a few stats from iSchool Connect. This is our platform, and people engage, students engage with our platform using the chatbot. In the last 6 months, this is how the numbers look, right? So there's 4,850 plus students who actually engaged with our chatbot, and they had 120,000 interactions, right? If you just, I don't have that graph here, but if you look at the percentage of them who actually wanted to speak to a human versus a chatbot, it's a starkingly sizable difference, right? It's like 20% of them want to talk to someone, 87% of them want to chat. And it's just because it's simple, they don't have to really be like they, you know, it's the millennials, right? Gen Z, they're just on their phones, talking, getting answers, right? So we'll look at it. This is how our website looks, but I don't want to go too deep into that. I want to actually show you how this works in the background. Okay. Just to make it more, closer to you, and so that you understand how it works, I've taken an example of University of Florida. Let me refresh. What we did is we took this on University of Florida's website, which is their entire dining hall information, and this is what students use right now to find places to eat and what's open. And we just spent like less than 48 hours and converted this to a chatbot where you can say, hey, where can I go eat? Give me directions, right? Or is Chick-fil-A open today? I feel like eating a burger. And things like that, right? At a simple level. But then we took it a step further, right? And you would have really seen that come up in the demo is now it's about how do we train this chatbot, right? Do we have to sit there and say, hey, for these questions, give these answers, right? And the answer is no. Because AI has reached a level where you can just say, take my website, learn on your own, right? And we would have seen an example of that. Here's my web page that talks about applications and how to apply and what to do with your applications and when to submit. And with a click of a button, it takes that information, learns, creates question and answer pairs, and then answers questions, right? If somebody says, where do I apply? It says, here's the link, go there, right?
Hi there. Welcome to University of Florida. How may I help you?
Right? So number one, it takes text, so people can chat with it, right? It's easy to change it from a male to a female, which we'll look at, or start talking to it. So for instance, I want to study abroad.
Which country are you looking to study in? Note that as of now we are only operating in the United States.
Okay, I want to study in China.
Sure. What kind of program are you planning to do? Undergraduate, BS, Master's, MS, or PhD? You can even say, not sure.
So we're going to move a little faster because of time. A regular chatbot might be able to answer this, right? But we're going to confuse this guy and see what happens, right? So we say, I don't know, maybe I want to do a master's in artificial intelligence, but from the United States of America. Bam.
Do you prefer a particular region? You can say things like West Coast or Northeast, or just say none.
So in that one sentence, there's a lot of information, right? And it actually understood that I'm talking about artificial intelligence as a subject. I changed the country from China to USA, and I want to do a master's, right? And you can just have that human-like conversation, and it's gonna do that, right? Now, if I say, for instance, where can I fill my degree application? Right? Says, sorry, I'm not sure about this, right? The information lies on this page, right? And all it takes is for us to say, right, copy this, train, now let's ask the same question again. And there you go. Right? So it took that from somewhere, right? Yeah. And it also knows that, hey, you know what, it's a link, people might want to click it, right? So it's a hyperlink, you click it and it takes you there. All right, let's get back. 20 minutes, I'm done with my time let's be moving. This is what people think, right? What do they think about chatbots? It's not intelligent enough, they get stuck. When they transfer me to an agent, I have to repeat myself, right? Don't you all feel that when you call a bank? Right. But with an AI chatbot, this is where things are different, right? This is how the numbers look, and this is from a real survey, and here's why, right? With an AI chatbot, when the conversation gets transferred to a human agent, you can actually see that it says, okay, please stay online, transferring you to a human. The conversation is going on while the AI is actually figuring out stuff on the back end. It's saying, here's what they asked me, help them out, right? So you know our bot just spoke to me about this information, you want to know about program fees, blah, blah, blah. It also picks up the student's information from the back end, but now it's also starting to use machine learning to understand that student, right? So this is a clear case where we work on taking a student's resume, reading it, and actually bringing out facts about the student, right? From a technology background, has a certificate course in programming, won competitions in analytics, most likely this is a candidate for MBA plus MS in analytics, right? This is the potential of AI, right? The super friendly iceberg slide, everybody loves it, right? What's our potential? So better understand and engage with your students, right? For the ISSS folks, or for admissions, as for prospective students. Retain your high value students and staffs. Understand what drives success, right? we use machine learning to actually look at 1,000 different things. And for one university that we worked with, we identified one of the success factors as going to the gym. People who went to the gym there, and in fact, even people who lived in a certain dorm, students who lived in a certain dorm were more successful. It's just right, interesting things that come out. Operating efficiencies and risk. Okay, I'll turn it over to Melissa to talk about a few applications at NYU.
All right, yeah, so one of the first things that we saw a potential connection with AI is something that we created as of late January 2017. So in response to the travel ban and all of the confusion, all of the anxiety that was happening with our students on campus, and just to give you some context, we had, because we have such a high international student population at NYU, we had over 100 students who were from the countries originally impacted. We had several students who were held up at airports. We realized very quickly that we didn't have a proper system in place to be able to immediately respond. Our previous experiences with students getting stuck at CBP were more casual, and like CBP officers were more friendly, hoping to try to get students in, because the NYU name matters within New York. I mean, people notice it and students are allowed in. But we were more concerned about what about those students who can't get in, who are waiting, who need ready access? How do they know even who at NYU to contact? And what if it's 2 a.m.? How are they going to be able to reach out to someone on our campus? And so that was a huge problem for us. And what we then decided to do is we needed to have some kind of solution to track these students, especially if they were from affected countries, or even students who were just anxious. So what we currently have live and working is highly manual. What we quickly did is, because NYU is a Google school, we created a Google form and we ask people to give us their travel details. If they're, we want their flight information, we want emergency contact, we want their email address where they can be reached, we want their phone number, we want to know if their phone number can be reached when they're traveling internationally. We want to know who their department is, so we can be reaching out to someone in their department if they're struggling at all. And who we partnered with, NYU is lucky, the law school has a project called the Immigrant Rights Clinic. And so we partnered with them. One of their projects is called the Immigrant Defense Initiative, where they really prioritize giving advice to students who are undocumented, but they've increasingly been seeing our own students who maybe they have some arrest, some minor thing that happened to them that's beyond the normal expertise of our office. Then we send students to IDI to help get assistance with that. So right now it's a joint project with IDI and OGS at NYU, where we both see the back end of the form. And then what happens though is, because it's so manual, we have volunteer law students who are then looking at who are our travelers. And then what they're doing is they're reaching out to travelers before they reach, or they want to know a couple hours before their departure time, did they reach the gate? Okay, so then they confirm whether they reached the gate. And then once they arrive in the country, we start texting them again. These are the volunteer law students. Did you make it through customs? If we don't hear an answer, we wait. If it reaches 3 hours, that's when these volunteer law students are then reaching out to the contact in OGS and the contact in IDI, so that if we need to go to the airport, we can then go to the airport to assist whoever is waiting there. So we realized though the problem was that we were starting to get a lot of people who wanted to have their travels monitored, and it wasn't sustainable with the law students who we had. So we had roughly, since we started this in late January 2017, there have only been around 200 people who have completed this travel monitoring program, who have decided they want their travels monitored. But we also haven't been able to actively promote it because of the fact that we're concerned about sustainability. If we're emailing 14,000 students, is that really feasible that we're going to be able to monitor all of those travels? So what we did is we reached out to Central IT at NYU to say, hey, do you have any suggestions for us? Is there something that we can look into? We were really expecting that we were going to have to try to probably pay a lot of money to have some outside contractor build something for us, based on what we started with the Google form. So IT surprised us and said, this is extremely timely, this is extremely important, we're gonna build it, and we're gonna build it for you for free. And so they had, and they also had like several international students who were on their team building it. So there was a lot of buy-in at the university. And so one of the things that we realized right away though is that we really needed to include public safety in, because by default, a lot of times public safety is who ends up getting these calls at like midnight. They find some contact. And so right now, that's who we're having conversations with. And so this is really what now it's already built. It's been built for the last 7 months. What's taking the time is actually implementing it. And why it's taking time is because we need to make sure that all of our stakeholders are on board, they've tested it, they understand how it works, so that we can then widely promote it. And so right now it's still held up with public safety. They're still reviewing it, but it's ready, it's built. And so how it works. So the student decides to have their travels monitored. They're going to enter in required fields of a form, and that form is going to be in, NYU has a database called Service Link for any students that need information. Now it's going to then, sorry, I don't know if this is distracting for you, it's distracting for me. I don't know if you can read it though, but it's basically the chat bot that NYU IT built is actually pulling select information from the database that students have submitted. And then that chatbot is also pulling information from a Google Flights API, so that if there are any updates to the flight, let's say it's delayed by 2 hours, well then the bot will know, and it's not going to start texting them, like when the original time was. And so then what happens is the chatbot interacts, and it's set up to interact via SMS or email. And then basically we continue to check in with the student. Did you reach your arrival gate? If no, they can say, I changed my flight details, and they can cancel having their travels monitored. Or maybe they end up, they ended up doing something else, they don't want to have it monitored, or maybe they're just delayed, something else happened to them. So the way the bot works is if they never board the flight, we basically drop it. Like they're not in country, our main concern is making sure that they get through CBP okay. And so if they then board the flight, then the bot will start interacting with them again after they land. It's gonna ask them at an hour after landing, did you pass through customs? If they say no or they don't respond, it's gonna ask again at 2 hours. If they say no or don't respond, it's gonna ask again at 3 hours. If by 3 hours they still don't respond, that's when the bot will then contact public safety, and it will also email the right person in IDI, the right person in OGS. And then the reason why public safety is involved is because sometimes our on-call people, like if they're sleeping, they don't notice that an email came to them. Public safety officer is going to call and make sure a real human actually takes that call and is able to address the situation. And so that's pretty much how that travel monitoring program works.
Quick question for you.
Yeah.
So if it asks a person they respond before they've gone through like CBP or something like that, is there a way to track that, or have they essentially turned off that function if they text too early and then might get delayed further on in their travels through the airport?
If they text too early, that they're...
Yeah, like if the bot sends a message and they text and then they're stopped 10 minutes later.
Yeah.
Is there any way is there anything to help with that? Or?
So usually the Google Flights API it's a 4-second real-time load if there's any delay in the flight. And then what usually we would do is say from the time the flight lands, it's usually about 40 minutes if it's an international person. And I think that's how we would set it up unless there's something else.
Yeah, and unfortunately we don't have enough information yet because it's not live, and then we can start working on those bugs and figure out other solutions from there then. So that was an example of where we started with tools that we had in-house. We built what we could. We looked for help outside of our office to see what could be built, and we're moving in that direction. So another example in getting started that we haven't gone past yet, but actually conversations with Ashish mean that I want to make it go further, is something that we just launched this summer at NYU, which is online advising. So we used to do this pretty ad hoc. If a student really needed to talk to an advisor, we'd make it happen through Google Hangouts or Skype or something just a little unorganized. So So now we have always available to students like online appointments that they can make at any time. And so, or at the times that are available. But again, it's highly manual. How do they know about it? They go to our contact us page and they see if they're outside of the New York City area, or maybe they're in New York and they just can't be bothered to come to our office, then they're gonna set up an appointment as, instead. But so then that link actually brings them to a Google Calendar that shows when the available appointment times are. They make an appointment, they get an email saying join this room, and then they come speak to an advisor from there. So the tools that we're using, Google Calendar to get the appointment times set up, and we're using WebEx to host all of our meetings. We kind of were on the fence about what to use. Again, this is a tool that NYU just has available to all offices, and so, but we weren't really aware of it because we weren't using it. And so I don't know how your schools operate, but oftentimes we're shocked to find that we actually do have something free and readily available for us. We just haven't been using it because no one told us it even existed. So now we're using WebEx, and the reason why I'm still favoring WebEx over Google Hangouts is because if there's any kind of delay in the conversation, WebEx won't make you lose it. It'll catch you up. But with Hangouts, things just kind of drop. And then you're asked, you know, like, can you repeat yourself? And so WebEx has just been working better. Since launching it in July, we've seen around 100 students, but we haven't, again, been widely promoting it because it's about, like, if we promote it too much, then will we have staffing to be able to then serve these students. The students who are most using it at this point are students who are on post-completion OPT, who are looking to transition to STEM OPT. So I'm doing a lot of questions on what do I need to do to get started, how do I fill out that I-983, and then new and continuing students who are outside the US. But those are also the students who we've most promoted it to. So we're emailing just our new admins, or we're emailing all of our students on post-completion OPT to say, hey, did you know this service exists? Now, the next steps in moving forward that I'm interested in doing more with Ashish is that our website is highly extensive. Like, I have labored over every page of that website, and I know that there's so much information. And so a lot of my online advising has been, oh, you know, like, have you reviewed the information on this page of our website? So I'm chatting them a link while we're talking. I'm sharing my screen so they can see what I'm talking about. And, you know, like, that's a lot of my time that maybe could be better served doing other things. And so if instead we could just have an agent online, and if a student says, how do I apply for STEM OPT? Well, then it can say, you know, like, you need to follow these steps, you know, for all the details, and then it can pull information from our STEM OPT, how do I apply page. And I apologize if you're in admissions and are like, what, I don't need to know about the details of STEM OPT. But anyway, but there's a lot of potential, and then that way, when students do actually come to me, ideally they're going to be in a much more informed state, so we can have a much more productive conversation within a shorter amount of time. But I will say, despite all of this, and students are so excited to be able to see us online and to be like, this is so cool. They're based in California. They need to see an advisor. They're tired of not being able to get anyone on the phone. And regardless of how much information they actually get from a bot, like, I've heard this from many students, like, even if the information is online, that's not enough. You know, like, they feel so much more comforted to hear from an actual person who's an expert on what's happening and what our guidance to them would be. And so with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Mackenzie.
Awesome. So I'm here to make sure that all of you understand that we're not in some sort of Isaac Asimov dystopian future where the robots are going to be taking over all of our jobs, essentially. So human relevance is a huge part of obviously retention and ISS, but it's also a huge part of recruitment, especially when you are a college, for instance, like a Fisher College, where no one really knows who you are or what you are. And so it's a very, that personalized touch and that human touch is usually what ends up getting students to enroll. So I have a fun little slide, hopefully it works. These are two stills from the kind of infamous movie Polar Express, which happens to sit in humans' uncanny valley, where they think, you understand that it's not a human, but you look so human-like that you get very uncomfortable with it. And so you might be comfortable with it for a little bit, but when compared to an actual Tom Hanks, obviously everyone would much prefer to be speaking to an actual Tom Hanks as opposed to some sort of humanoid animatronic thing in this corner. And that's pretty much how students work their way all the way through AI. They're very comfortable with the artificial intelligence, they're very comfortable with those automated responses, but at the end of the day, those are pretty much supplemental to an actual human interaction and an actual human connection. So, I mean, we are a social species. We want to be able to talk to people. We want to be able to speak to an admissions person and all of that. So as I said, you know, how many of you had heard of Fisher College before, 30 minutes ago when I introduced myself? That is a lot more than I thought. Okay. Awesome. Well, how many of you either work with, or have some sort of relationship with a small college in Boston? Yeah, that should be almost everyone. So to differentiate ourselves, we actually ask our students when they come in for both their registration days over the summer and then again when they actually enroll in the fall, why they would choose Fisher College. We're very small, we're a little under 1,000 students. We barely show up on the Google when you go through all of this stuff. And most of them say it's because of a personal interaction that they had with an admissions professional. Now, that kind of goes against a lot of what they were just saying, but as I said, that CRM, all of those automated messages are basically just a pathway to an actual interaction with a person, something that will make you stick. So the big things are the personal connections and our interactive experiences. I assume most of you end up using one of these, a Slate, an Element, a HubSpot, a Hobson's, and you set it up, or your marketing communications sets it up so that they are sending out automated emails and making sure that any questions that students have, the ones that we get 8,000 times a day. What's your TOEFL score? How many SATs do I have to send in? What's the bank statement? How many scholarships? All of those. So the way that you can set up your CRMs, and I'm sure that your marketing people or you enrollment folks might be doing it manually yourself, to look for those keywords so that when students are emailing you about a TOEFL score or they're looking at a web page on your site about internship programs, if they aren't responding directly to your emails so that you can kind of take it off your plate, that way that they get an automated response with our minimum TOEFL score is this, if they've been looking on that section of their website, just to make sure that they are in fact getting the information that they need in order to apply and eventually enroll at the college. So these are some of our favorite ones. We actually use Element 451, and as a quick story, we were actually quite manual up until about 1.5 years ago. We were responding to all emails that came into our inbox. We really had no automation at all, as is the case with a lot of very small schools. I'm sure that budgets, especially in the admissions department, can get a little tight when you start asking for things that might actually make your life easier as opposed to make your life harder. So we actually just made the switch over to Element 451. It takes a good amount of manpower behind it to make sure that all of the emails that you're sending out, even if a student has heard, has emailed you 1,000 times, they're going to be getting that response for the first time. You don't want to turn off students by just having an automated catch-all email that says everything. So building out that specific part of your CRM, although it's not quite up to a chat bot, is a very important and very easy step at the very beginning of your automation process through all of this. So that's something that would deal with the funnel. I'm sure all of you, especially in the enrollment process, have seen this. That just kind of qualifies all of your leads from a perspective to an inquiry to an applicant. As soon as you get to that part, you have to start responding to all of their emails again. You have to make sure that all of the information that you're collecting, the data management is absolutely key, so that when you go in, it does make your life easier. You can just look someone up in the system and it'll say that it's, Mandy, they're from the UK, they're interested in studying biology, they've looked up the internship program at MIT for a little bit, and that way you actually have that kind of supplemental information so that your interaction with them is not as shallow as it would have been if you were the one asking all of those questions at the very beginning. So this is, as I said, a very basic way to start implementing automation so that you can actually gather all of the information, have meaningful interactions, and push the students from their applicants, their admits, to an actual enrolled student that then was speaking to you for the next 4 years. Awesome. Another way that we have implemented this kind of low budget automation is through virtual college fairs. Education USA has virtual college fairs, College Week Live has virtual college fairs, and they're very cool in that you can go and you can design your own virtual booth. You get to talk to tens of thousands of students, and depending on which one you sign up for, you can either all log in at once and start typing in questions, see a recorded webinar, see information on the school before they even go up, so that they actually end up qualifying themselves before they even sign up for your virtual booth. So they all use the WebEx rooms, and as I said, they're very, very easy to personalize and make sure that your students, when they actually get to you, know what you're talking about, know what you're offering, and they are going to be asking a lot more descriptive questions. They're going to be just much more qualified leads at that point.
All right. Yes, we have precisely about 12 minutes left. Amazing. How was it so far? I see some smiling faces. I see some confused
Can we just talk to
faces.
the bot?
Can we just
We're just gonna talk to the bot.
I'm sure you're gonna.
We'll do the Q&A with the bot.
Yes, you can like spend a sleepless night talking to the bot. That's what I did when we first created it. I said, oh my god, just talking all night. But all right. Before we do a little more of roadmap and cost and timeline, any questions? Because we should take some time and ask.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about you can interact 24 hours. I do international recruitment, daytime hours are different from our time, our daytime hours. So if you're interacting at a time with the bot during midnight here, and they say like they want a live person, how is that?
Great. So there's a couple of ways of doing it. One is where you set up somebody to work in those hours, either offshore or onshore. But the other way is based on your working hours, you can set up the bot to say, okay, I have somebody available, let me connect you to that person. Else say, hey, we're outside of working hours. So got your question, somebody will get back to you tomorrow, right? But at least till that point, all those basic questions will get answered. And that's that connection you make. Plus you might also get their contact information, right? This is a person who's interested in get that. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
How does the chatbot work with poor written English skills? Or spoken English, things that are not grammatically correct, or just specific phraseology that my office is used to, but
LOL.
computer might not be?
Great question.
Okay.
Great question. So the chatbot you saw is built on something called Google Dialogflow, and it can interpret 18 different languages, and it can also interpret local dialects and ways of asking questions. So for instance, one of the examples I gave is in the US, students might say, what are your working hours? But a student from India might say, what time are you open? And it gets it, right? Because all these technologies, like Google Dialogflow uses Google search capabilities in the back end. So all those crazy things people type on Google search actually feeds the bot and trains it, right? This is how people ask questions. And somebody said LOLs. You can integrate with Facebook, and students can be on Facebook Messenger on your page, chatting with you, and you can actually use Facebook's smileys and all those kind of things in your chat conversation. Anything else? All right. Quick slide on. Will that work? Yes. Open-ended, right? Thoughts on getting started in your office. This is anonymous, so if you didn't want to ask that question and be pointed at, you can just start typing on your phone. Same, go to your message window and just give us your thoughts. What do you think, right?
what might you want to implement in your own campuses based on what you've learned today? Like, what are areas that you could potentially focus on? You know, because again, this is an iterative process, right? So it's like you might have to start small, but then maybe 2 or 3 years later you can get somewhere else. And we hope that you would all share these thoughts so that you could all get ideas from each other as well.
Aha. Admissions, easy answers. How do I convince my stakeholders that this won't create more work? Really? Okay. We'll start answering those one by one right quickly as we have time. How much does it cost, right? And I'll take you to that slide, but like Melissa said, and I think at some point Mackenzie also mentioned that you can literally start at no cost with a lot of these technologies, right? Google, a bunch of stuff that NYU is doing uses Google, and say G Suite, it's free, right? The chatbot that you saw runs on Google Dialogflow, and it's literally $0.00001 per minute of interactions. So you literally are spending cents a day in having those conversations. The effort actually comes in building it up, right? It will, and we look at that timeline. I don't want to get out of this slide, but we look at the timeline of how much time it might take. Once you're done with the development, the operating costs are almost negligible for something like this. Used to answer pre-departure questions. Okay, I think that's for you, but that is not so clear.
Well, she said, how would you use it?
Yeah.
And so they were saying,
build something.
I would use it to.
Oh,
help the
okay.
student.
Oh,
That
okay,
would be a
perfect.
way of use.
Not a
Got
question,
it.
just an
That's
idea.
not anonymous anymore.
But I think
No, it
the
wasn't
cost
me.
thing.
I'm sorry, I'm interpreting somebody else's.
Okay.
You
You
said ideas or
questions.
questions, that's an idea.
I was gonna say with what she's just talking about with cost though, yes, they may be free, but then my next concern would be, what if I don't have that expertise and I have to pay someone who has that expertise? Who are the places, or where are the places I could go?
Yeah.
And then how much are they gonna cost me, even if these technologies are free?
Yes,
Yeah.
got it. And we have a slide for that, and we've talked about that. That's where people like me come to play, not a sales pitch. How can it be integrated with ESL students who desperately need face-to-face interactions to improve their language skills? Interesting question. The bot can be used in multiple ways, and we can probably look at it after this. You can stop by, but you can integrate the bot with your video interview software, right? Where it's talking to someone and it says, okay, I want to connect, and now the video pops up and they can actually have a Hangout or a WebEx or something, right? So when it comes to specific use cases like ESL, you can train the bot to do those kind of certain things, right? Those tasks. How do I convince my stakeholders that this won't create more work? Yeah, exactly. You use the example that I showed you, right? Where, hey, we have a bunch of information. It's stored somewhere in the vault, or it's on our website, or it's in our databases, right? Companies like High School Connect or Google or whoever, right? These are companies which will help you figure out all that unstructured, structured information and put it into a bot, which kind of brings me to the next point that Melissa, you were also trying to make, is roadmap, right? So engaging with someone, in this case, I'm just showing you how that bot was built on Google Dialogflow. iSchool Connect works a lot with the Google Higher Ed team. We do a lot of this work together, right? So what that does is brings a lot of that expertise in-house to talk to you, right? So the first step is to spend, say, 48 hours just hacking it, right? So it's a hack it, prove it, nail it, scale it methodology, where in the Hackett phase, you're sitting with people who matter in making decisions, who are evaluating your day-to-day organizational activities, and you're identifying those key problems that you want to solve, right? And that step, Hackett, is more something that you do internally within yourselves before engaging with some external company, right? The next step is to prove it. Now that you have your 2 or 3 big ideas that you want to implement, you don't spend more than 3 or 4 weeks and a little bit of money just trying to get a proof of concept out, right? That's going to show you and your leadership. Somebody asked that question. it's going to show your leadership on what this is capable of doing at a minimal cost, right? So it can range anywhere from say $2,000 to build that to again like $20,000, depending on what your use case is, right? Typically, the use case is, here's my admissions data, right? Here's information on our website on admissions. Here's our database, here are things that we've been answering, right? So some schools came back to us and said, here's 2 years worth of conversation logs, and we learn from that, right? We build models that look at your 2 years worth of logs and identify, yeah, okay, these are the best answers to give. Again, very short lifespan for that proof of concept, less than 3-4 weeks. Doesn't cost much because it's from, say for instance, from an iSchool Connect perspective, that's about a week of effort to just build it, a couple of resources. The nail it and scale it is when now you're thinking of scaling this across your organization, right? You've applied it to one function, which is admissions, and it's working well. You see that students are interacting. You're seeing the ROI. I have spent X and I have got so much result in terms of engagement. That's when you scale it out, right? Typically, to give you a broader range, we've done this with schools for anywhere between, say, a $10,000 to $15,000 for a basic out-of-the-box chatbot to even, it goes beyond $200,000 because they want to build an online AI world campus, right? Where all their staff, their students across different campuses around the globe are all connected, and then the AI is looking at every little detail, success metrics, retention, alumni, talking to them, right? Getting funds, all that kind of stuff. So it really depends, that's the short answer. I would urge you to think around all of this. If you have questions, talk to us, right? And we'll see how we can help you out there, right? Any more questions around this? Great. Okay, very important for our future, for the presentation's future. Please give us your feedback, right? It will help NAFSA and us in understanding how this presentation went across to you folks, right? Awesome.